seek, and... Alright, seek and destroy!
And that is 1983, Seek and Destroy, live at the Metro, Metallica. This is Discussion to Truth. I'm your host, Ian Trottier. In Hamilton Trottier, you can find the work that I've been doing now for about 4 years. After career in business management, I started a parking company in San Francisco called iPark. The name was sold essentially to a Manhattan firm. So if you're ever in New York City and you're parking a car, you're walking past the garage, and you see the name iPark, that's my name. Not my company. I sold the name. All right, so, and I've done some other things before this, but past 4 years, look, I was living in Miami Beach, and the Zika virus came to town, the mosquitoes carrying the Zika virus, and this is why I started doing what I do, because the research that I conducted alarmed me so immensely. I was talking to the manager of a small studio, online studio in Wynwood, Kitty, and she said, "Hey Ian, why don't you come and talk about what you're discovering in studio?" And I did, and that's when I started a weekly talk show that transformed into something called Discussions of Truth, and here we are. Book coming out, contract been in hand for well over a year, closer to 2 years. Trying Day Publishing will be publishing Freedom Reserved, No More Lies. You can buy that right now on Amazon, pre-ordered, get your copy. And you know what? In regards to Seek and Destroy, I've been opening up with Seek and Destroy now for over 3 years. Been doing the show for 4. And it basically, the phrase is symbolic of what we all should be doing. Seeking out and destroying corruption in politics and in any facet of our life. And there's a lot of it out there. IanTrottier.com, TROTTIR.com, has a list. And by the way, that website was deplatformed. It was taken off by the former host, Yola. I'm using a different host now, and so far so good. But look at the list that I've compiled of literature online. It shows extensive research. One of the cogs to that research is a fellow out of Stanford named Anthony Sutton, former Stanford Hoover Fellow, Dr. Sutton, exposes the immense banking corruption that is just getting incredibly carried away. And so much that I was in D.C. in December, and I was at a hotel lobby, and I was speaking to a senator from Texas. And Sessions is his name. And I said, Pete, he had 26 at the time, he's now 28. $26 trillion debt, the federal government. Why is it that regardless of the political aisle, whether Republican or Democrat, regardless of the political aisle, our federal government continues to sink deeper and deeper into debt? Isn't that an issue? Is that an issue of concern? He says, yes, there's a lot of us up on the Hill that are very concerned about that. So then I asked the question, I says, Pete, do you realize that the Federal Reserve is majority privately run? Yes, there's some public aspects to it, but it's a private bank that controls the strings of the federal government. He says, I had no idea. Can you send me some information? So I did. So anyway, seek and destroy. That's what we aim to do here. Discuss the truth. Seek out and destroy. I actually would listen to that song, not far removed from that year, 1983. I think that was the year that it came out in their album Kill 'Em All. Riding my skateboard down the streets of San Francisco. So, right, the topic of California. We're bringing on the next guest, who is literally forming a new state out of the existing body of land that we know as California. And that state he'll be naming New California. So anyway, so next guest is Paul Preston. And we just finished with Michael Betras, author of COVID-19, Lockdown is on Trial. And get his book, listen to that episode. You'll find it on anchor.fm. You can find it on iTunes, on Spotify, a number of different outlets. And I'm streaming regularly, 24/7, select episodes at discussionsoftruth.com and some other outlets as well. Before we bring on Paul, let me mention that for those of you that are familiar with my work, I'm not doing the regular Wednesdays at 5 live. These are all pre-recorded because I have been doing remote work and gear up for April 16th and 17th out of Oklahoma. Dr. Simone Gold and some Andy Wakefield, some great speakers, great guests. I'll be likely doing some live work from there. So anyway, that's an event hosted by Clay Clark. Check him out on Twitter. And here we go with Paul Preston. Dialing him in right now. Paul Preston, I believe the founder. Let's get some more information of New California. This is Ian Trottier for Discussions of Truth.
Hello.
Paul Preston, Ian Trottier here. How are you, sir?
Good. How are you?
Fantastic. Welcome to Discussions of Truth. Paul, look. Let me first off say that I commend you for the work that you're doing. For listeners, give a little bit of background of who you are and what you're doing with what you're doing.
with the New California state.
Yes.
Yep. Well, what we're doing is forming a new state from a pre-existing state. And the new, of course, is New California, and the existing state is California. And it's the Article 4, Section 3 of the Constitution. That's where we're working from, and that's what it provides for. So California is a very much distressed state right now. People understand that. It's a failed state. Let's be very clear. It's a failed state. And it is failed in its primary functions to govern. And you can see that as evidence that the number one goal and function of our state is to educate our children, yet our schools have been closed for over a year, and that's because of the financial mismanagement of the state.
So you've got, and I like the language that you're using here. You've got a failed state. What is arguably the fifth largest economy in the planet? It can very well and could very well be its own country. New York, and I would say Texas, Florida, perhaps in that order, are the economic engines that drive the government or the country that knows the United States. California is an incredibly important, not only landmass but organization. And again, we got a governor, or you've got a governor there that people seem to be fed up with. Update us on that situation. We've got a massive. I think the last number I heard was well over 2 million people that are collectively pushing to recall and get Gavin Newsom out of Sacramento.
Yeah, the total number of signatures that they gathered is about 2.3 million. They needed about 1.5, and it looks like they're well on their way to have those signatures certified. So that's a good thing. As far as getting rid of Gavin Newsom, the question is, can you get rid of Gavin Newsom? Because since the COVID virus, he essentially has exerted executive power and authority because the entire state, thus usurping the legislature's power and also the judiciary power. So he is clearly a dictator, plain and simple. He is a dictator. And so as a dictator, he can actually order the recall election to some other time.
Wow.
Like maybe November of 2022.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Again, I like the tone that you're using. Paul, tell us, this isn't something new, and in fact, you began this effort to section off and form a new state out of the state of California, which historically we know, maybe some of our listeners don't know, but we had Alta California and Baja California when California became a republic and left the Mexican Union. It was absorbed into the federal government. So that state that we know as Alta California, currently Baja California still exists and remains part of the Mexican Union. You were talking about taking Baja or Alta California, what we know as California, and sectioning off quite a large landmass, and basically leaving only the areas of San Francisco and Los Angeles and that coastal line that connects the two of them. I looked at a map. Looks like that's by and large the area that you're calling to remain California as we know it. And then that whole agricultural belt in the middle, and then Northern California, and you can talk about the state of Jefferson, that movement. My point is here for listeners to understand is that Paul you began your efforts to section off and create a new state before this pandemic arose. Talk about that a little bit.
Correct. Well, it was because the state was failing them, and now it's just failing more. It was a failed state then, it's a failed state now. And of course, one of the things that we already pre-identified before any of this is that we don't have a Republican form of government. We do not have representative government in California. We have a monoparty system. This has been going on for years. We've been dealing with this. We also are not free from invasion, and California has been the stellar state out there inviting illegal foreign nationals to invade our country with inducements such as driver's license, right to vote, and things like that. And of course, the aid that they get, if you're an illegal foreign national coming to California, you get top priority on everything. The citizens of California get second shift. So we're not free from invasion, and we're certainly not free from domestic violence, which is exactly what the Guarantee Clause, Article 4, Section 4 says we're supposed to have. So this has been going on for years, and that's one of the reasons why we said that we watched the declining issue going on financially, in particular towards schools. They've been short-shifting educational systems in California since the early 1990s in a big way. In fact, the public schools, the K through 12 schools alone, are owed about $40 billion from the state of California today. So that $40 billion was not used to help educate those kids from the early 1990s until the current day today. So you start looking at those things and you realize that if you're not a state and you're not providing those things that are guaranteed by the United States Constitution in Article 4, then you are a failed state. Now this whole thing about them closing up the businesses and all that because of the COVID virus is just nothing more than their lame excuse as to their mismanagement over billions of dollars over the last 30 years. And this is where we're at now. We're at that point when Margaret Thatcher says, socialism's great until you run out of everybody else's money. And that's exactly where we're at right now. So they just are barely making it just for payroll. They're not making it as a state at all. That's anybody think that they're even remotely making it as a state is just misleading. They're providing some basic essentials as a state, but as a state, it's failed completely. And, they've pushed businesses out because they were taxed, over-regulated. The total, socialist economic model that they have here has been a complete failure. And like I said, because of environmental regulations and everything else, it's just driven businesses out wholesale. So we have no tax base. And now they've just shut businesses, which, this is the thing about this closure of the businesses, is that the closure of the businesses means that we don't get anywhere from $3 to $5 billion per month from the businesses themselves that provide the tax base that we have left. So it's just insanity what's happening. So we figured this out a long time ago.
And
that's why we declared our independence in January 15, 2018. We've had 7 constitutional conventions. We have a government. We have an active government that we are, did you call it a shadow government, whatever you want to call it. We're being the government of New California all over the 56 states, 56 counties that we have access to it. You know, the other thing that we've found out in this whole process is California is a very, very conservative state. And it was demonstrated, I think, the last election, the numbers were just totally off, and we know the election fraud that went along with everything. But California clearly is a very, very red state. And like I said, I've been to all 58 counties for myself, and there's really only 2 or 3 counties that are truly blue counties, but they're the counties that control, you know, the media, control the legislature, and control high finance in San Francisco. So that's why we're being misled. You know, when we made our model for California, there's 40 million people, and we were going to draw all kinds of lines to come up with a different map and everything. And then we finally realized, well, you know, where do these people live? And we realized that 20 million people live in the urbanized areas of California, such as LA Basin, San Francisco, and Sacramento. And the other 20 live in rural California. And that's why rural California, or New California, looks the way it does. You take a look at the current map. I think maybe you may have looked at the older map. The current map does not link the coastal areas at all. We discovered that the coastal areas are absolutely incredibly conservative. Even Santa Barbara County are way over the top conservative, and are just angry because we've had the elections that have been taken. You know, everybody saw what happened with the election to the entire country. But California has been enjoying that kind of election system with all the Dominion machines and so on for about the last 25, 30 years. So we've seen this thing happen. We knew it was going to happen nationally at some point, and it did. So the whole nation saw what we've been experiencing in California. It's complete fraud. So they've been able to control the election. They've been able to control the legislature. They've controlled the Constitution by destroying the Constitution in California. The Constitution that they're working with is the 1879 Constitution. And listen to this. Our U.S. Constitution has been amended 27 times since 1789. If you take a look at the 1879 version of California's Constitution, it has been amended over 600 times.
Wow.
So one of the amendments they brought was a 11-month legislature. California's original Constitution was like Texas, because Texas and California kind of grew up together, actually. Declared independence in 1839 together. Both are Lone Star states, by the way. That's why we have our big red star on the flag that we fly. In honor of that, in honor of Texas, actually is our sister state, because that was the origination of California. The same year they both broke away from Mexico. But the state of California, New California, as we've got it established today, is going to be a free market economy. It's not going to be a socialist, communist economy. And we're going to make sure that we have a Republican form of government, make sure that we have no invasion and no domestic violence. Those are the guarantees that we're supposed to provide, and we're going to do that. And yeah, it's a kind of a perplexing time. We're pretty happy that the governor looks like he's going to be recalled, and we're going to get a candidate that we think is going to be amenable to New California. And that's yet to come.
So you talk about a Lone Star state. Texas is famous for being known as a Lone Star state. I didn't know that California was a Lone. What does that mean?
Well, if you take a look at if you know Texas history, I love Texas history, by the way, but I also love New California history and the history of how California first came about in 1839. It was in 1839 of March that Texas declared independence from Mexico. And, of course, they fought with the Alamo, and they defeated Santa Ana. And then by November of 1839, California declared Alta California, the Californios declared its independence from Mexico, meaning from San And of course, the spinsters put the material together, the seamstress put it together, and the flag was dedicated in honor, really, of Texas declared their independence the same year that Alta California declared their independence.
And Alvarado, was he a general that led this original revolt against the Mexican Union? Who was Alvarado?
Yeah, Alvarado was one of the Mexican governors, and he was tight basically all throughout California at the time. Now, keep in mind the population in California was minimal, maybe 20,000 people. I mean, we're 40 million now, but 20,000 then. So you can imagine what this whole thing was like. It was a very small, tight-knit community. Yet they were able to manage to get up and down, the state very, very well. The missionaries, the Spanish missionaries, laid out the 21 missions. It's kind of an interesting story because it's springtime and there's flowers all over the place where I live. And you've got mustard out here. Now, mustard is a yellow flower. You've probably seen it before. The mustard is not native to California.
Interesting.
Mustard is native to Europe. And the reason it got out here is because the Spaniards decided that they were going to build these missions. But a mission had to be at least one day's walk or ride from one another. And so they didn't know what the territory was. They didn't know how to coordinate their position. So what they did is they brought these mustard seeds out, and they spread the mustard seeds between each one of the missions, and that was their yellow brick, I guess you'd say your yellow brick road from one mission to the next. And now, of course, mustard out here, the yellow variety, is all over California, but you really see it in the coastal range and where the linkage is between the missions.
Wow, that's fascinating. I've never heard that. Now, if we look geographically, and I want you to talk a little bit about what kind of support you're getting out of those 20 million, or even the other 20 million that are concentrated in those kind of let's say socialist type areas. Paul, I started a website a couple months ago, and I've been doing this show now for 4 years. But I started a website because I was drawing conclusions that are similar, I think, to maybe what you've been drawing or you have drawn, and that this is clearly a socialist and communist movement going on here, not only in California, and that's right, the hotbed of it, but even nationally. When I started this website called Stop Communism, and I was immediately deplatformed. It started getting a bunch of traction, a bunch of traffic, and I was deplatformed. That host is based in San Francisco, and background on that is I actually lived in San Francisco for about 8 years when Kamala Harris and Newsom were running the government there. So I'm no stranger to those two folks either. But I was coming up with that name. I was deplatformed, and so now I'm running my various websites on a different. A different engine, but if we look at geographically, and I guess we can get in communism, and I want you to talk about the support you're getting. But if we get into geographically, we're looking at a coastal line from basically San Diego to Seattle, about a little more than 1,300 miles. We're looking at about the same, a little bit longer, from Jacksonville, and not including the peninsula of Florida. So we just go to the top of where Florida meets Georgia. We take that coastal line, which is about parallel with San Diego, and we go up to Maine, and we're looking at about the same distance. So on the West Coast, we have 3 states representing that coastal territory. And then on the East Coast, we have about 13 states divided amongst that geographical. And so I guess where I'm going with that is, how will your new government represent people geographically, and then percentage-wise as far as populations? You can talk about counties, but talk about before you get into that. Talk a little bit about the support that you're currently getting today in 2021.
Well, the support that we're getting is growing because people are becoming desperate, and they're looking for a real alternative, and we offer the real alternative. We already are a government that's running in place, and we're doing a lot of different activities to represent people now, whereas the real government is not doing that. And we're providing services, actually, to some degree, as the government would provide, and we're going to get more aggressive about doing that because, this is a we the people thing. The government isn't doing the essential things that we need, so we're going to do it ourselves. coming here, and we've organized ourselves that way just exquisitely. Actually, it's working very, very well. It's going to continue to work real well. So the people are coming in and clamoring to us like crazy, more and more and more, and they'll get more intensive in a couple of months because we have some real big major international endorsements coming for New California in support. So it's this as these big entities and names come on board, people are going to go, we're the real deal, and they're realizing it. And we have to negotiate with the legislature to make this happen. In the California legislature, they're the reason for the failed state. So those people are going to be more than they are going to be more than. In fact, they are the ones we talk to. They're more than happy to work with us. It's their way out. They have no way out of this financial crater that they're in.
And Paul, and the financial crater you're talking about is about a $362 billion deficit by the state of California. That's massive. And again, nationally for listeners, we're at about a $28 trillion federal debt. I mean, we're debt everywhere. Everything's debt-ridden based off of fractional reserve banking, in my opinion. But again, so in order for this to become reality, you've of course got to go through the existing body of governments and its legislature, which is based in Sacramento. And you're saying that you're gaining some traction there.
Oh, well, we've got huge traction going on. And in the next couple of months you're going to see more people come out publicly and support us, and some very, very influential individuals and corporations and things like that. You're going to see that this is absolutely no joke. And we will be the 51st state. I mean, we're becoming it right now. And there's nobody else around that is doing this. Doing it. I shouldn't say that. We have two other states that are in development that are following our model, which is really the model of the Constitution and the Founding Fathers and what happened with West Virginia when they formed. But our model is being called New Illinois right now, and New Nevada. And we also have people that are working very diligently in New Oregon and also in New York, New York, I guess I like to call it.
Wow.
They're working some things behind the scenes. We've also been in touch with people in Virginia who want to form another state and get away from Richmond. But it's all about basically getting away from the urban versus rural situation, that there's no representation of the rural model in government. And that's one of the reasons why the rural California is very depressed. California is not. It's getting more depressed because businesses are leaving, but the elites live in those areas where they have the good houses, the good houses and the good life now. But there's great poverty in California at this point because of their system. And it's just incredible to think of California being a poverty-stricken state, the fifth leading economy. Well, that money doesn't come to the state of California. It is not used by the state of California. You've got your high-tech businesses everything's offshore. In California, gets a large amount of money from them, but a lot of the money that California gets, the state of California and its leadership over the years, being so corrupt, has managed to export that money to China and to other foreign countries and other liberal areas around the nation, in particular liberal states who need it. We just had a big scandal of $100 billion that was leaving through our EDD, which is our Employment Development Department. In other words, our unemployment, and $100 billion. This is by an audit. The Kent State Auditor found this. $100 billion with a B was leaving the state of California through the EDD, and that was over the last several years. So China got most of the money. So we've been exporting money to other places as well as so you say we're the fifth economy leading. You can see that we're the fifth leading economy, but that money comes and goes, and we don't see a dime of it here in the government, or what the government sees it, and they use that money to their social welfare programs by providing welfare and others. We have the highest amount of people on welfare in the nation. Over a third of our people are on welfare in the nation. California. A third of our people. And that's growing because we have so many people that are coming here from other countries, and we're importing the illegal foreign nationals, which are the invaders, basically.
Yeah.
That's why we don't have the money that everybody says that the fifth leading economy should have, because we're pandering to communist China and other countries as well.
So let me ask you a question, Paul. We can look at the existing model and how that's become corrupt, and on your main website, there's a great video, there's a great interview with a gentleman from the Epoch Times, I believe it was, that goes into some of this. But the you mentioned. Well, let me start here. You in a new state, you've got to be able to defend yourself.
Hey, listen, I'm going to have to cut this short here because I have to go to another function right now. But can we do this again?
We can certainly continue this. Absolutely, I'll be in touch with you through your agent, and we can certainly continue this.